All right. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us here today for Resilient PA's Community Conversations. This month's community conversation is going to focus on infant and early childhood mental health, and we have Brandy Fox here with us. We also have Ramona French and Kali Tennis, who are joining us to help moderate the conversation today. Before we go ahead and get started, I'm going to go ahead and just give everybody a quick tech update. When you join, you are muted. If you could remain muted, that would be great. I am going to give everybody the permission later to unmute themselves to ask questions or to just talk amongst yourselves in the breakout rooms. So everyone will get that later. If you want to go ahead and turn on your video as well, especially when you're asking questions, please feel free. It's nice to see everybody's faces, even though we're doing this virtually. We're going to go ahead and use the chat and the QA function today to do any questions or any tech problems you have. You can go ahead and put them in the chat and the QA, and somebody will be sure to help you out. And this is going to be recorded, so you can go ahead and see these resources later, and we'll make sure we send out the recording to everybody that's here today and everyone that registered. So if you do have any questions, please feel free to use the QA or the chat. I'm going to go ahead and kick it over to Kali, who's going to do our icebreaker today.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. So we're going to try this little call and response. So you're invited to turn on your camera and wave in response to all these relationships that you might currently have with an infant or that you have had with an infant in your life. You're invited to say hello into the chat, turn on your camera and wave. Or I don't know, Amanda, if the mute can be turned off so people can say hello and share their voice into the space. So I'm just going to give a call, and everyone's welcome to respond, and feel free to respond with that prosody of voice and that tone that you might use with an infant when you say hello. So hello to all the moms.
Hello.
Hello to all the caregivers.
Hello.
Hello to all the parents and godparents. Say hello if you're a godparent. Say hello if you're a grandparent. Say hello if you're a family friend. Say hello if you're an aunt or an uncle. Say hello if you are a sibling. And say hello if you're an early childhood educator. Say hello if you've ever been a babysitter. And say hello if you're an adult who was once an infant. Yay, that should be everyone. Thank you so much for participating in that little hello. Hello, we're all connected, and thank you for being here for this really important topic.
All right, Ramona, go ahead.
All right. Amanda, do you want to share a little bit about Resilient PA?
I'm sorry, I did forget to do that. So I am Amanda McNaughton from Resilient PA. I am the staff liaison here, and I'm sure that you have all gotten emails from me or heard about me or just seen me pop up. Resilient PA is the grassroots coalition that spans statewide and is really dedicated to bringing people together to learn more about trauma-informed spaces in different regions and to create trauma-informed coalitions across the state that are made up of professionals and people who are just interested in making their communities a better and safer space. We also partner very closely with Heal PA to get out some of their materials to local communities and make sure that we are creating resources that are accessible and easy for people to use. So thank you so much, Ramona, for reminding me.
I wanted people to know who you are because Amanda is our host today. And I always say she's the hostess with the mostest because we do appreciate the work that she's doing with Resilient PA. So my name is Ramona French, and I am one of the co-chairs for one of the organizations that she works closely with, HEAL PA. I'm the co-chair for the Racial and Communal Trauma Action Team. I run a business myself called Wings of Hope Coaching and Consulting, and I've been doing this work with Kali and Amanda. This is our fourth community conversation, and we couldn't have these conversations if you were not here. So I appreciate you guys taking time out of your busy schedule to be here with us to talk about this very important topic today. Now, we have a fabulous speaker today, Brandy Fox, and join us in welcoming her. Brandy is the director of cross-sector infant early childhood mental health initiatives at the Pennsylvania Key, where she bridges the policy and programmatic work of the Office of Child Development and Early Learning and the Office of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services under the Pennsylvania Department of Human Services. Brandy is a licensed clinical social worker who received her Master of Social Work degree from Temple, a postgraduate certificate in autism studies from Penn State and Chatham University in Chatham University's Infant Mental Health Certificate. Brandy has achieved both infant and early childhood mental health endorsement as a policy mentor. Her work includes implementation of statewide IECMH consultant services. She's currently the board president of a global organization called the Alliance for the Advancement of Infant Mental Health. All of her roles are focused on promoting cross-sector collaborations and strategies on infant and early childhood mental health policy and practices. Now, y'all, that's a lot. She is everywhere and she is everything. And so, Brandy, well, I welcome you and we welcome you to this conversation. Brandy Fox.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here. And you start to get a little uncomfortable when people read that bio. I guess I would just say that I love babies. I'm a parent of what I still deem as babies, but they're 15 and 17 years old. And I think that, you know, the most important thing are our babies and our young children, because what I'll share today is what happens in their earliest years sets the stage for how they become adults in our communities and end up taking care of us at a later date. So thank you so much for having me. And I'm really excited to share a little bit about infant early childhood mental health. And maybe my goal today is just to create some shared common language around all of us that are doing kind of HEAL PA and Resilient PA and working with families and adult caregivers across our community, and even, you know, supporting and working with our own family members and our own neighbors and within our scopes of work. So I'll just start with, you know, everyday parents and other adult caregivers impact the next generation from preconception forward. Sometimes the issues parents and caregivers face hinder a child's life trajectory, especially in early childhood. And it's imperative that cross-system, multidisciplinary professionals working with very young children and their families are knowledgeable and skilled in promoting social emotional development and addressing mental health concerns from birth through middle and late childhood as a way to promote good mental health, prevent the development of pervasive concerns, as well as intervene with developmentally appropriate and relationally focused clinical interventions as soon as possible so that we mitigate lifelong impacts. Next slide, please. So the image of babies on a couch may be the first thing that comes up to you when you hear the words infant early childhood mental health. I know that the first time I heard these words was in October of 2010 in Philadelphia at an infant mental health conference. And I was struck by those words because as a clinically trained social worker who spent most of my professional formative years kind of delivering mental health counseling in elementary schools, in outpatient setting, and even with adults, you know, I was kind of perplexed by that statement because my training never included some of the most recent research around early childhood brain development and ACEs and different things like that. And so when I heard I think it was Dr. Bruce Perry talk about early childhood brain development and talked about what happens in the first 3 years of life, setting the stage for their, these young children's futures. It really changed my entire professional world. And I kind of found what I wanted to do when I grew up. So the next slide. So we're just going to talk a little bit about what is infant mental health. Well, infant early childhood mental health really is synonymous with healthy social emotional development. It is, early childhood mental health is the foundation of healthy and lifelong development. And we often kind of use those terms interchangeably, especially in the early childhood systems world, where we're working with, childcare educators, home visitors, all of kind of the supports and services that OCDEL supports. We really are honing in on how do adults build their own capacities to support a young child's social emotional development, AKA their mental health, through relationships, through routines, through attachments, and different pieces like that. So let's break that down a little bit. If we go to the next slide, when we talk about social emotional development, AKA a child's mental health, we're talking about their ability to the developing capacity around how they experience and regulate their emotions, how they form secure attachments with their adult caregivers, and how they explore and learn, all in the context of their family, of their community, and their cultural background. But we can break that down even further on the next slide. So when we look at that definition of what social emotional development is, or what early childhood mental health is, we're looking at that concept of developing capacity. So the Center for the Developing Child out of Harvard's updated research says that there's 1 million neural synapses that are made every second in the first few years of life within that young child's brain. And that's so many opportunities to build babies' brains in healthy ways through serve and return. So mommy coos at baby, baby coos back. All those little interactions are building pathways in that young child's brain. And they do that within trusted relationships. When we talk about forming close and secure adult and peer relationships, infants are born to connect with the adults around them. Infants and young children require nurturing relationships with adult caregivers for that healthy social emotional development, to learn how to regulate, to be co-regulated when they're upset or they need a need met, different things like that. So when adults are loving and responsive and consistent in their care, very young children learn that they are valued and that their world is primarily satisfying and predictable. They learn through these relationships how to interact with their peers. And in the first few years, they require a lot of support from adults around, regulation, around expressing their emotions, around learning how to share with others, around following directions as they get a little older in those preschool ages. So adults are so very important. And you'll hear me say multiple times that the relationship is the intervention, whether or not that is a child to a parent to a teacher to their supervisor, or a system to a system. All of our relationships matter. And if we're holding babies in mind around the decisions and our own interactions, then we're going to improve kind of how young children grow here in Pennsylvania. So the next slide I just want to share that, there is a broad application of the term infant early childhood mental health. It's used to describe the full continuum of services and supports from promotion, prevention, and treatment, which are necessary to promote healthy development, prevent mental health problems, and treat mental health disorders. So not only does IECMH or ECMH mean kind of a mental status of how our young children are doing, but it also is an interdisciplinary field that follows certain mental health principles around young children and early relational health. There are certain practices that an infant early childhood mental health professional embodies. And really it's this core belief around relational health, and that relationships are the intervention for very young children. And you can't treat a child out of the context of their family relationships. So the next slide just kind of talks about prevention and promotion and intervention on a pyramid. OCDEL often talks about kind of a public health approach to early childhood. What are we doing for all children and all of our workforce? What are we targeting in the prevention area to meet the needs of some of the population that are just kind of illustrating they might need a little bit of more help? And then what are we doing at that top of that pyramid when we know that a family or a member of our workforce really needs some additional support? How are we thinking about addressing infant early childhood mental health on all of these different levels of the pyramid? Because we know that supporting social emotional development, AKA young child's mental health, we're talking about promoting wellness, preventing early toxic stress and trauma, and intervening as soon as we can with whatever service is most developmentally appropriate. So the next slide is one of two slides that really shares one of my favorite infographics from the 0 to 3 organization that really tries to explain the multidisciplinary nature of infant early childhood mental health work. So this slide just talks, it just reinforces that definition that I've already shared around the importance of adult relationships and how adults build the capacity of a young child to express their emotions and to get along with others and all of those things. But I wanted to share the next slide really hones in on, it shows the many different systems or scopes of work where infant and early childhood mental health work is conducted. I would ask, do you see your professional role there or a future professional role? You know, you'll see that we have pediatric healthcare. Pediatricians are one of the first specialists that a new baby will visit with their family, right? So ensuring that our healthcare system has infant early childhood mental health knowledge. They know where to connect families when they need a little bit more support. They can share some of that developmental guidance, right? We have early child care and education. Children spend a lot of time outside of the care of their families in the care of childcare. And so ensuring that our systems are building the capacity of those adult caregivers to be nurturing and responsive and develop attachments with these babies and young children, because they're helping us raise our children when we're working. And so it's really important to ensure that those environments are really nurturing and responsive. Home visiting is another one. You know, we have a wonderful network of home visiting in Pennsylvania, someone coming to sit alongside a family member and support them. And you'll see some other systems on here. We have early intervention that we know does a lot of support of our babies and preschoolers across Pennsylvania, looking to partner with child welfare around children who've experienced trauma and how do we all wrap around them to improve their mental health. Policy is a big piece. How are we changing policy and practices around our systems partners supporting the 0 to 5, 0 to 8 population in a more holistic way? And then, you know, the judicial system kind of goes hand in hand with some of those pieces. I just want to highlight that, you know, infant and early childhood mental health is the responsibility of many professionals in that continuum of promotion, prevention, and intervention. It's not just for mental health professionals. So I just want to throw that out there. So our next slide just is going to reinforce a little bit because I have a video that I'm hoping works. We will see. But just wanted to share, you know, about 90% of a child's brain is developed before age 5. So all of those neural connections every second creates pathways. And those can be reinforced positively or negatively. And so it's really important that we are maximizing those opportunities in the first 3 to 5 years of life to support a strong foundation for a child's brain. And it does slow down significantly once they enter school age, but you can still change it. It's still pretty pliable. All right, so let's see. I wanted to try to share a video from the Alberta Family Wellness Initiative out of Canada, which kind of talks a little bit about what we already went over around brain development, how the first few years of life are integral to connecting with others, and a little bit about how toxic stress derails brain development. And I'm just hoping that it works.
Science tells us that the experiences we have in the first years of our lives actually affect the physical architecture of the developing brain. This means that brains aren't just born, they're also built over time based on our experiences. Just as a house needs a sturdy foundation to support the walls and roof, a brain needs a good base to support all future development. Positive interactions between young children and their caregivers literally build the architecture of the developing brain. Building a sturdy foundation in the earliest years provides a good base for a lifetime of good mental function and better overall health. So just how is a solid brain foundation built and maintained in a developing child? One way is through what brain experts call serve and return interactions. Imagine a tennis match between a caregiver and a child, but instead of hitting a ball back and forth across a net, various forms of communication pass between the two. From eye contact to touch, from singing to simple games like peekaboo. These interactions, repeated throughout a young person's developing years, are the bricks that build a healthy foundation for all future development. But another kind of childhood experience shapes brain development too, and that's stress. Good kinds of stress, like meeting new people or studying for a test, are healthy for development because they prepare kids to cope with future challenges. Another kind of stress, called toxic stress, is bad for brain development. If a child is exposed to serious, ongoing hardships like abuse and neglect, and he has no other caregiver in his life to provide support, the basic structures of his developing brain may be damaged. Without a sturdy foundation to properly support future development, he is at risk for a lifetime of health problems, development issues, even addiction. It's possible to fix some of the damage of toxic stress later on, but it's easier, more effective, and less expensive to build solid brain architecture in the first place. One of the things that sturdy brain architecture supports is the development of basic emotional and social skills, an important group of skills which scientists call executive function and self-regulation can be thought of like air traffic control in the child's mental airspace. Think of a young child's brain as the control tower at a busy airport. All those planes landing and taking off and all of the support systems on the ground simultaneously demand the controller's attention to avoid a crash. It's the same with a young child learning to pay attention, plan ahead and remember, and follow lots of rules. Like all of us, kids have to react to things happening in the world around them, while also dealing with worries, temptations, and obligations on their minds. As these demands for attention pile up, air traffic control helps a child regulate the flow of information, prioritize tasks, and above all, find ways to manage stress and avoid mental collisions along the way. Having this ability is a necessity for positive and level mental health. Developing effective air traffic control, overcoming toxic stress, and building solid brain architecture are things kids can't do on their own. And since strong societies are made up of healthy, contributing individuals, it's up to us as a community to make sure all young people have the kinds of nurturing experiences they need for positive development. To build better futures, we need to build better brains.
So just to let you know, I did put the link to that video in the chat. It's one of my favorite videos. I have lots of favorite videos, but we can go to the next slide. I think, and I would love to hear your thoughts about that video in the chat box if you wanted to share that. So what we learn, through the early childhood brain development research, we can go to the next slide. There we go. It's really is just that all the early learning, all the early experiences that our young children are having really shape the architecture of their brain. And so you'll see in that video, building a human brain is a process that begins before birth and continues through adulthood. And a strong foundation early on increases the probability that a child will build strong social and emotional skills, which are just as important as cognitive skills and physical health. And parents and caregivers and community members and family members and systems partners, right, play a critical role in supporting their children's mental health and can nurture it by actively engaging with their children and building caring relationships. And when parents need extra support in this area, that our system has a wide variety of programs and services that are available to provide support and resources and build their capacities to be in relationship with their child. The next slide, please. You know, it also talked a lot about how development is a highly interactive process. You know, the environment in which one develops before and soon after birth provides powerful experiences that can chemically modify certain genes in their brains and create those pathways. And then those genetic factors then exert kind of potent influences on our human development, on environmental factors that are around us, have the ability to really kind of alter a child's trajectory. So like, for example, children they're born with the capacity to learn to control their impulses and focus attention and retain information, but it's their experience in those early years that really help them figure out how to do that. So they have the capacity, but they need adults around them to help them figure out those pieces. And that's that executive functioning piece. So we often say children grow and develop in the context of the relationships around them with adults. And they are not born able to share. You know, Maddie and Brendan don't share immediately, like they're taught how to do those kind of things. And so it's really key that we think about all the adults around a young child's life and how are we using those amazing opportunities to build their capacities. So thinking about the next slide, you know, some of that video and what we've been talking about are how close relationships with sometimes not the family members in some certain circumstances, and or, you know, when moms and dads or parenting couples are at work, children might be in childcare or with another family member, and those relationships are just as important, right? So having attachments and relationships with other adults do not interfere with the strength of a young child's primary relationship with his or her family members. And in fact, multiple caregivers actually promote a young child's social emotional development, and they can actually buffer stress and toxic stress. So those relationships can kind of mitigate the impact of ACEs and different things, stress factors that might be going on with young children. All right, so thinking about that, so the next slide just kind of talks about that young children can be adversely impacted when there's a lot of different stresses, and it just reinforces that those can actually change the brain. But it's not the end game, right? We know that caregiving, responsive, nurturing caregiving environments, building the capacity of adults around young children can actually help to buffer that, like I said before. In the next slide, you know, we talk about this little guy tantruming and crying. You know, we've seen it. We've seen little people kind of need to cry it out and maybe tantrum or just having a stress response, you know, but I want to say that doesn't necessarily count them out, right? We're talking about systems approaches to building adult capacities. We're you know, if we're always holding in mind the ACEs study, the adverse childhood experiences study, we can start to think about how our environments and how some of these experiences are impacting babies. And we can start to try to intervene earlier with promotion and prevention type services, or even beefing up our clinical, our behavioral health system in order to have clinical interventions at an earlier point that are developmentally appropriate and focused on early relational health, and get our parent-child dyads in those services early so that we start to mitigate any future needs for a higher level of care. And it's all about the relationship. So relationships are the intervention. And so how do we build those relationships and make them nurturing and responsive, or help them to become nurturing and responsive? So, you know, thinking about resilience, you know, this is resilient PA, right? Thinking about resilience, you know, the capacity to adapt and thrive despite adversity develops through the interaction of supportive relationships, biological systems, and our gene expression in our brain. So despite the widespread yet erroneous belief that people only draw upon some like heroic strength of character, science tells us that it's the reliable presence of at least one supportive relationship and multiple opportunities for developing effective coping skills that are essential building blocks, right, for strengthening the capacity to do well and face adversity. So oftentimes they talk a lot about, you know, when I was growing up or when I was in my clinical, you know, work, we talked a lot about nature versus nurture. It's actually both. And that even if your primary relationship with a parent or a family member, kinship care, whatnot, is stress related, the other adults around you can help to build that resilience and build your capacities to move forward through that toxic stress. So it's a village, right? We're all doing this together, and babies are being touched by lots of different systems partners. So how do we start to think about this holistically and work together and braid funding or share our human capital, our the way we think about things to really wrap around families as early as possible with promotion, prevention, and intervention type approaches to help our babies thrive. So the next slide just kind of talks about this concept of holding. We can go to the next one. Yeah, kind of thinking about holding babies in mind and what decisions are we making as policymakers, as systems leaders, as early childhood educators, anything that we're doing, holding the baby in mind and wondering how is that going to impact the baby? How will that improve things for our babies and our young children and our preschoolers, right? So just thinking about relationships being the intervention from the get-go, thinking about whole family approaches making a big impact. So how are we wrapping around families? How are we connecting them to the different services available in our community to build their capacity to support their young child's development? The concept that good mental health during the early years sets the stage for lifelong success. And how do we conceptualize that within our scope of work and within our spheres of influence? And how also do we think about as systems partners, how we're offering warm handoffs and pathways to support, thinking about how if you're an early childhood educator and you're seeing a little bit of a red flag, how are we having courageous conversations with family members about maybe seeking an earlier intervention referral to just see where this little one is developmentally, so that I, as the educator, can do a better job of so I can understand the needs of that baby in my environment, and just thinking about how our systems can make things easier for families to access services, and using this language of early childhood mental health is their social emotional development, which helps to reduce that stigma, because it can be very concerning if someone says, I think your 2-year-old has a mental health issue, right? But it changes when you start talking about mental health as social emotional development, because that's a little bit easier to conceptualize and also start to actively pick out strategies and supports that can fill those gaps for that young child. All right, so our next slide, we're coming up on another one of my favorite videos that I will post in the chat as well. So thinking about now, we've kind of talked a little bit about the foundational understanding of early childhood brain development and the concept of good mental health and wellness for young children. Let's step back and reflect a little bit. A foundational key of infant early childhood mental health theory is that we all, as adults, come to our roles in our communities, be that personal or professional, with what we received in our early years. So as you could tell from some of those videos, our brains are formatted around what we experience as young children, and it lays the groundwork for who we become. And this applies to adults too. So I wanna watch one of my favorite videos that helps to illustrate our collective opportunity to work better together on behalf of our youngest babies. So this 5-minute video depicts a theory of change from the frontiers of innovation. It's about the community achieving breakthrough outcomes for vulnerable children and families. It describes the need to focus on building the capacities of our caregivers and strengthening the communities that together form an environment where we're supporting early childhood mental health. So let's go ahead to this next slide and play this video.
Brandy, before I go ahead and start the next video, we did have a question in the chat.
Okay.
And I think it's an easy one. What does it mean with warm handoffs? What do you mean by that?
That's a really good question. When I conceptualize warm handoffs, it tends to mean that I've developed as a clinician, as a mental health consultant, as somebody with a scope of work, that I've developed relationships with the other systems partners in my community, and I can warm hand off a family there. So let's say, for example, my husband works in medicated assisted treatment. And perhaps he has a pregnant or parenting patient. He knows my name, he knows my agency, he knows what I do. He can connect that family directly with Brandy over at the Pennsylvania Key or with Joe over at case management, right? So a warm handoff to me is a professional or a systems partner has developed relationships in their community and can hand that family off to someone that's trusting, that they know what that service is and would help that family access that. It's going to look completely different in different communities. But one thing I learned, and I was the grant director for Project Launch under OMSAS several years ago, that even in our most robust, resource-rich communities, a lot of our systems partners don't know who the other people are and what they're doing. Maybe don't know their name, not sure what the referral pathway is. Not everyone, but there are some parts of our sectors that just don't know. And so I think it's part of being in our early childhood system is knowing how to help families navigate the barriers of our system. And sometimes that's, hey, I'm going to connect you with Brandy over here because I know she has a service that can help you. That's kind of what I mean. Hopefully that helps talk a little bit about what I meant by a warm handoff.
I think that was perfect, Brandy. Thank you.
Okay.
I'll go ahead and move you on to the next slide for the video.
Okay.
The social challenges that face modern societies, whether it's the ability to work productively, to be a good citizen, stay healthy, have their roots in early health and development. A strong foundation in early childhood results in much better and more effective development later. A weak foundation really puts us behind. The most important thing children need to thrive is to live in an environment of relationships that begins in their family, but also extends out to include adults who are family members in child care centers and other programs. What children need is for that entire environment of relationships to be invested in their healthy development. We've shown from decades of testing interventions that we can improve outcomes. But the magnitude of those impacts is not good enough. Science is now available to help us think about what we might do that would have a bigger impact than the best of what we've done before. So we began to ask, what could we be doing differently? What could we do to be smarter? Children who are at the greatest risk for the poorest outcomes in learning and health and behavior are children who experience a pile-up, a cumulative burden of one after another of risk factors. And then the burden is more than any child could be expected to overcome. So we began to focus on the development of the adults. What could we be doing to strengthen the capacity of everyone who interacts with children? This led us to think about the kinds of skills you need to deal with adversity. These skills of focusing attention, planning, monitoring, delaying gratification, being able to solve problems, being able to work in teams, executive function and self-regulation. They're also the kind of skills you need to create a well-regulated home and school environment in which healthy development and learning can take place. And then brain science started to tell us that differences in those skills start to develop in infancy based on the environment kids live in. So how do those skills get built? Well, if you don't develop them early, how do you develop them later? Actually, you can build them later because the period of flexibility and plasticity for this part of the brain doesn't fully mature until age 25 to 30. And then the light bulb went on. The reason we're not getting a bigger impact is not because we don't know about how to influence development, but because we're giving information and advice to people who we need to do active skill building with. Skill building by coaching, by training, by practice, but we're not doing that. So we now have developed this theory of change that says we need to focus on the development of the adults who are important in kids' lives.
So try this.
How does that work?
That's a new idea. Buen trabajo.
We need to focus on their skills, their needs, in order for them to be better, more effective parents, in order for them to be better prepared to be employable, which would enhance the economic stability of the family, which is also good for children. Second of all, we looked at many people in preschool programs and childcare centers. And we said, what are we doing to build those skills in the providers? They need skill building as well. And also the community can help to build and reinforce the capacities that parents need. And the community also includes programs in which the people who work in the programs have sufficient skills. Third of all, what are the major sources of toxic stress in this community, and how can we reduce them? Moving it up to a policy level, how are our policies strengthening communities' abilities to reduce sources of toxic stress and caregivers' abilities to provide what kids need? The development of our human capital is our future. The development of a productive workforce is our future. The development of a healthy population is our future. This kind of future orientation is critical for a healthy society. It's critical for a thriving business. It's critical for successful environmental relationships to raise children. It's all about being able to plan for the future, to have a future. And that's why this is so important.
I'd say just checking into the developing child.harvard, that little, I just Googled the Center for the Developing Child under Harvard, and then that website will come up. And there's some wonderful resources and research briefs on supporting young children, reducing ACEs, increasing executive functioning, and some of these really good kind of short videos that help us as adults and systems partners to think differently about how we're supporting young children and their families. So it's just one of my favorites. I show it all the time. Hopefully you'll bookmark it for yourself too and share it within your sphere of influence. So I want to switch gears a little bit with the remainder of the presentation. And if we go to the next slide, kind of on that concept of warm handoffs and ensuring that we understand and know what might be available in our community in terms of supporting, the 0 to 5 population and their families. I want to just share a little bit about what kind of early childhood services system supports we have in Pennsylvania. Just to give you a sense of what you might want to, who you might want to connect with in your community as you're thinking about young children. So the Office of Child Development and Early Learning provides many supports and services across the continuum of promotion, prevention, and intervention. Those services and supports include kind of regional early learning resource centers, which are kind of like early learning hubs for families and programs to connect to. Families can be connected to their early learning resource center in order to find high quality childcare, or be connected to others, home visiting and family support programs and different things. The 19 early learning resource centers that OCTEL have are really meant to be hubs for families and providers to connect. We also have, early childhood education programs, be that childcare, licensed childcare, high quality childcare, state-funded pre-K or state-funded infant toddler slots, Head Start, early Head Start, migrant Head Start. There's quite a lot of different opportunities for family childcare, for families to access the type of childcare that makes the most sense for their family. Within our early learning resource centers, we have quality coaching, which really is another way of building the capacity of our early childhood professionals in teaching and supporting very young children in high quality environments. So those quality coaches are at each of those early learning resource centers. Since 2006, OCTEL has funded infant early childhood mental health consultation. So that's my team at the Pennsylvania Key. So if any one of my consultants are on today, use your little emoji to raise your hand, because I know I saw at least one. So I have 30 staff that are around. Hi, Lisa, thank you. that are around the state regionally that can go into early learning programs on behalf of a child that maybe a program is struggling to understand their experience and how best to support them. And so our consultants go in and really try to sit beside that educator or that teaching team and that family member to figure out what the child's behavior is telling them and how we may adjust the things that adults are doing so that child can have their needs met in a different way. We also do a lot of screening. We do a lot of referrals and warm handoffs if there's something that, you know, we feel in collaboration with the family that another support service may be beneficial. Also on here, you know, Octel has a lot of evidence-based home visiting. There's also a lot of community home visiting that may not be funded by Octel or the federal government, but is available in your community. So home visiting is always a great way, hopefully, to build that parent-child relationship. Family support programs are in the communities doing the same, parents as teachers, different things like that, as well as our birth to 5 early intervention services. And I'm always surprised because in Pennsylvania, early intervention is birth to 5, right? In other states, it might only be 0 to 3. And I kind of feel like those other states should catch up with Pennsylvania and think of early intervention and the ability to support our youngest little ones who might have a developmental delay earlier and up until they enter school age. Okay, so let me share a little bit more information about what Octel and the Pennsylvania Key and all of our partners do. The next page, I'm going to talk a little bit about some of our efforts in addition to those boxes we just talked about. We do have, if you go to the next page, we have a public awareness campaign, or we launched a public awareness campaign within the last couple of years around supporting social emotional development for very young children. If we go to the next slide, the website is www.pakeys.org/Bright and it'll bring you to our page. And on this page is some of the materials that we developed in this public awareness campaign that was really meant to create some shared common language. So you'll see 5 videos that help to talk a little bit about what infant early childhood mental health is and how our early childhood systems partners, all of us, can help support a young child's social emotional development and their family members. So there's 5 videos, really short, 3 minutes, that talk about infant early childhood mental health from different pieces of that work. We have some print materials, some handouts that are geared at different age groupings that can be shared with your partners, that can be shared with family members, that you can attach to a newsletter, you know, just to bring more attention and awareness around the needs of our 0 to 5 population. I'm also working on adding to that page some audience specific messaging, key messages around infant early childhood mental health that you could use as you're interacting with leaders in your community or other partners, or, you know, advocating for different things. We've got some messaging that can help to draw attention back down to our babies and really start to think about promotion and prevention before they need a higher level of care. So lots of great resources there. The next slide gives you a QR code to check out our team's infant early childhood mental health newsletter. So my wonderful team puts their heads together to come up with a theme every month to share about infant early childhood mental health. Those newsletters may have a little bit of research, a little bit of theory, some hands-on activities, places to go for more information. We really try to make it a holistic approach to sharing information. Feel free to sign up for those newsletters. I believe when you go to this link, you'll be able to see the last 1.5 years of newsletters. So it is something that we love to put out there, and it seems to help all of our partners kind of get a little bit more information. So the newsletter is great. So the next slide I just want to talk about is kind of our consultation program. So the program has been supported by Octel since 2006. At that time, it was 3 consultants. We are now up to 30 consultants across the state. And the consultation team is regionally based, and they tend to serve kind of within a 2-hour diameter of their home office so that they're in the communities that they live in and supporting partners in those communities. It is a free program available to early childhood education programs that are licensed. and our pre-K counts partners. We do not tend to deploy consultants into Head Start or Early Head Start because they have a different federal funding stream that requires mental health consultation, but we will partner with them and do warm handoffs and share professional development and all those kind of things that we can do to be more collaborative. The goals of the program are to help early learning professionals and families build confidence and know how to support young children's social emotional development, to reduce early childhood suspension and expulsion practices. So for all of you on the call, young children under the age of 5 tend to be expelled 4 times more than children in the K-12 system. And oftentimes those individuals are male individuals that are Black or brown. So there's a disproportionate impact of expulsion on our BIPOC young children in childcare. So our goal really is to go in there and support the environment so that child can maintain their placement in early childhood settings. We also do a lot of connecting families and childcare program staff to community resources on behalf of that child and on behalf of their own program. Next slide. So we'll talk a little bit about how IECMH works. So we're different from other child services like early intervention or behavioral health. We don't provide, my staff don't provide services directly to children. Instead, we work with the grownups. So we're an indirect service that builds the capacity of adults to do what they need to do to support young children and to build their skills and to fill their toolbox with different ideas on how to support children that might be coming with different experiences. So they help coach, they coach teachers and directors and families around kind of a collaborative action plan. We do professional development around social emotional development and trauma and autism. So we have lots of different expertise on our team around just, building the toolbox of adults that are working in our system. So IECMH is really more of a social emotional wellness program. We might come in on behalf of a child that's challenging, but we're really just kind of working around attachment and different ways that adults can do things in their environment that reduces the likelihood that a young child will have to use a challenging behavior to get a need met. The next slide just gives you a sense of kind of what our services include. When we're called in, when our consultants are called in on behalf of a child to work in a program with parent permission, we do an observation. We sit in the corner or to the side and really get a sense of what's going on in that environment. We partner with the childcare professionals to identify strengths and challenges or strengths and opportunities around a young child. They develop an action plan with different strategies to help meet that child's needs, as well as build that adult's capacity to support all the children in the classroom. We do a lot of bridging between the early childhood program and the families. Oftentimes, one of the expulsion research says to us is that when a child care program staff don't have a really good relationship with that family, that the expulsion risk increases. And so we really try to help those adult caregivers get on the same page and improve their relationship, because we know that directly impacts that young child's functioning. And then, like I said, we assist with resources and referrals if need be, and bridge those different systems components for programs. Let's see, our next slide. I'm almost done, I promise. I only have 33 slides. The next slide just talks a little bit about the benefit of consultation. So we know that mental health consultation works because it's reducing caregiver stress, it's boosting confidence, it's increasing our ability to sit back and reflect and wonder about a child and about a behavior and about a feeling, right? That reflective practice. We know that it helps to reduce the likelihood that a child is going to have to use a challenging behavior, like running around the classroom or hitting a friend, or if you're a 2-year-old biting, right? Because we're working with those adults to kind of catch those things before they happen and adjust the environment so they don't have to happen. And really, we really look at mental health consultation as helping to keep parents from missing work. Because oftentimes if a parent is called to pick up their child half the day, or their child can't attend these full day services, it impacts that family's stability in terms of being able to work and maintain healthy home environment. So through mental health consultation, caregivers learn how to recognize every child's strength and potential, to figure out kind of what's really going on when those behaviors are being illustrated, respond to problem behaviors in appropriate and positive ways, help children develop important skills like sharing, getting along with others, and resolving conflict, and connecting with children in ways that promotes their strength or their growth and development. So we want what's best for kids. All of us want what's best for kids. And sometimes having someone come in and sit right next to you and have a conversation with you really helps adults figure out how to support those little ones. So the next slide kind of shares the last service I want to tell you about is our new office hours approach. So during COVID, we really had to adjust. We were an on-site, sit next to you kind of service, and then everything shut down during COVID. And so during that time, we started doing teleconsultation, and we really loved it. And programs loved it. And so what we've done is develop our virtual office hours approach. You can sign up for an appointment with one of our consultants to talk over any concerns you may have around a child's social emotional development or behavior challenges, or even something you're struggling with as an adult caregiver working in the early childhood system. Like, there's a lot of stress out there right now. And we know what we know about adults is if we're dysregulated as adults, we cannot co-regulate a dysregulated child. So we have to pay attention to what's going on in ourselves as too, because there's a direct impact to babies and young children. So office hours is just a general consultative approach open to any of our systems partners. You just make an appointment to talk it out. Families are accessing us. We've had early intervention, behavioral health, lots of different partners just call up and make an appointment and to talk through something. And it's been a really beneficial service that's expanded our reach, actually, and we're reaching more programs and more families through this. So office hours are held twice a month. I've shared the QR code, but we'll make sure to share the link to where all of those flyers are posted. We do have program focused for early childhood. We have a family focused flyer so that it encourages families to use office hours. And we also do have a new school age childcare focused mental health consultation that uses office hours as well. So that's that 6 to 12-year-olds that might still be in childcare. And that middle childhood period can be really difficult. And so we have someone now that can field those questions. So before I end, I have a final video. Have your tissues ready, perhaps. This is one of my favorite videos from 0 to 3, and it's just driving home how important relationships are.
I see you. I see you. I feel your love. I hear your cries. I love who you are. I look forward to who you will be. You are my daughter, my son, my niece, my grandson. You are mine.
I see you too. I feel you. I hear your cries. I love you so much. I love you to my future. You are my grandfather, my auntie, my daddy, my mommy. You are my identity.
Oh, Autumn, what you just said. Now everyone go to the mirror and do the same thing with your inner child. That's powerful this morning. Thank you for sharing that. 0 to 3 is one of my favorite resources. Lots of resources for professionals, lots of resources for families. It's one I promote a lot. They do a lot of advocacy and policy around infant early childhood mental health too. So I'll make sure that we get that link out to you. It's one of my favorites because it's very moving about the power of the first few years of life and those early connections. So I'm going to kick it back to Amanda, because are we going into small groups before we do questions, or what do you want to do?
Yes, so we do have a couple questions in the chat and I do see them. So if I have reacted to your question, I did see it and I'm keeping a note on it, but I'm going to go ahead and put us into breakout rooms first. And then we will go ahead and we're going to do those for 10 minutes. And there should be about 8 people in each breakout room. After the breakout rooms, we're going to come back and do a couple like report outs. We do have some questions here that I'm going to go ahead and put in the chat. Everybody should be able to see those. So you can go ahead and think about one thing that surprised you about infant early childhood mental health, and one thing that you will take back to your workplace, home, or community today. So I'm going to go ahead and open up those breakout rooms and unmute everyone. So you will be able to unmute yourself now. And I'm going to go ahead and open the breakout rooms. Ready, set, and go.